everybody. Good morning. Hi. It's Friday, by the way. Have you guys ever heard of the saying, it's Friday, my body knows it? Have you guys heard of it? It's well known in the Hispanic community. In Spanish, es viernes y mi cuerpo lo sabe. So essentially, every comes, I'm always excited because I'm ready for the weekend. I'm ready to hang out with friends, hang out with my kid and all that. So I'm happy to be here with everybody here today on a Friday. Is going to talk about the joy of TypeScript. Usually when you work on TypeScript, you don't really feel joy. Can I get a show of hands of how many people have worked on TypeScript or are working on TypeScript? Okay, we got a room full of people. Okay, cool. So might be a refresher for a couple of you. For some of you who are still fleshing out this talk, I got to put it under 20 minutes and all that. So mind you, just be patient with me. If you have any feedback, give it to me straight. I love blunt feedback. And another thing is, if you're struggling with anything, I'd really like to know about it because I could eventually put it in this talk as well. So I'd appreciate it. To introduce you myself, I'm Adrianna, Sales Loft, and I'm a senior UI engineer, and I have been using TypeScript for over a year and a half. And so at first, I was like many other people. I didn't want to use it. But eventually I had to use it because it started to become a standard at work. And so personally, to get to know me a little bit, I have a 9-year-old boy. He's been 2 years. I don't know how. He's growing up really fast. Another thing is my hobbies, or I like to say one of my passions is astrology. I'm an astrologer on the side. I've been studying astrology for almost 10 years. If you love to talk about astrology, please, let's talk about it as well. I have a cat named Silver, and I love planting, and I'm planning to build my herb garden in my backyard pretty soon. So if you got any tips about that as well, please let me know. All right, cool. Let's go to the next slide. So what we're going to just talk about is just some simple tips, some helpful things that could help you as you learn TypeScript, or if you don't know about it already. It's helped me pretty much well. It's like training wheels somewhat. And then we're also going to talk about how to read errors a little bit more effectively. And so we're going to go over how that looks like a little bit with the help of an extension. And then the bumps in the road, pretty much. Some things that kind of like help me adjust to figuring out how to set up TypeScript and set up types and interfaces and stuff like that. So we'll go over that and then just go a little bit over an overall picture of why TypeScript is pretty much important and why I've discovered it as a senior UI engineer. Really helpful in terms of building an entire React project. I think if you've ever heard of domain-driven design, I've recently started to apply that into my work. I've kind of already knew that, but I put it into, I finally conceptualized it and realized the framework, it's helpful. We're gonna go to the next slide. So code snippets. Has anybody ever used code snippets before? Raise your hands by any chance? Okay, got a couple people, some people. All right, so it's really helpful to just give you like a straight template of something that's already like there, and you can use one with interface as well to kind of set that up for you. So you can add that as an extension to your VS Code. It works with JavaScript files, regular JavaScript files, and React as well. So really helpful. So total TypeScript. If you use TypeScript, if you've been developed, I'm assuming you guys also know this extension as well. So this extension is really helpful to give you hints, kind of read your errors a little bit better, kind of more in English so that when you're reading your errors, you're not flustered or frustrated. Another thing that I believe this provides when you're using types, we get kind of negative reinforcement every time we see like a red squiggly line, and we kind of get like flustered and we're like, oh, what is this? What's this problem? So this extension actually adds a lot of blue squiggly lines, and I believe it gives us a lot of mental positive reinforcement in TypeScript. Whenever I see a file full of blue squiggly lines, I'm kind of proud of myself because this is all the times I use types. I'm getting better at it, and that's how I like it. So this is pretty useful for you. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about reading errors more effectively. If you see, actually on this translation is used based off of the extension that we last talked about, total TypeScript. So a lot of the times when we're reading errors, we kind of get really frustrated. Most of the time, when you're first starting out in TypeScript, you kind of don't want to read the error. You kind of like, you're like trying to figure out what's wrong and what it's telling you what's wrong, but you're not going directly after it. So this extension, Total TypeScript, is really great at breaking it down. And it's important that we end up looking back at our types and what exists today and making sure that we have everything applied to what we're trying to use it in our code. So I think it's really, really helpful to look at that. So in terms of locating types, most of the time we like to put our types to our components. When I'm building services, I like to put especially if those services, I'm exporting functions or anything like that, I like to put those types in a nearby file of the list and then export it out the service so that it's easily accessible. And sometimes there'll be types that don't always come out of the service or anything like that. But this is a helpful method to make sure that you're staying within the same origin place to where you're creating your components at. Strict null checking. So if you have this set up in your configuration for your TypeScript project, you probably run into this a lot because you're not guaranteed for the object that you're checking on or an array you're checking on. You're never guaranteed that that's if it exists or not, especially if you're doing a find function. So these are one of the things, and if you a simple solution, right, is to do to see if it exists. And so this is a very common error that most people come across as. You can go to the next slide. All right, cool. Type versus interface. So for the most part, a lot of people will say like you can use them interchangeably, but there are different cases for these. I think type is more accessible. You can use it with most structures, and you can apply unions and intersections in there. But directly, you can't use unions and intersections on the interface. But you can inherently use them when you extract the interface out. So I find both of these can be used interchangeably, but you will find that sometimes you can't always use interface. But the plus of interface is that you can extend it as well. So this is a good to know about these two. Some people usually get really confused. Which one can I use? Type is always the safest to me. Unions and intersections. So we use this pretty much daily, obviously checking for different types, and you add on more and more things as you kind of get used to it. These are kind of your best friends. These are always going to be really helpful as you discover there are more types that you need to start adding on to your types. And then also your intersections as well are really helpful when you need to have distinct types, but there are other options where you need to put these together as well. So cool. So forcing types. Very common. You may end up wanting to force a type. It's very easy, can happen, but obviously it's not recommended to assert a type all the time because of the situation where we might come across where we're kind of losing type safety. You're putting more bugs in your code base as the code base grows bigger. And so as you assert more things to kind of come across, we kind of lose the origin of what our actual types are for variables and functions. So you always want to be careful about asserting types. And this is using the as keyword if you see on line 2. Sometimes it's helpful in terms of like working with libraries that may have unknown types or they're not very well typed. And so you may want to use it in this case, but be very rigorous in terms of when you use it and what places, and make sure it's put in one certain place so that they're not all over. And another thing that this could affect is when you force types is that you also kind of dumb down TypeScript, and then TypeScript is not able to kind of recommend helpful tips for you as well. So it's also to be very careful. It's usually a way to cheat, but you want to be careful how often you cheat. So great. So I recently gave a talk at Connect Tech. If you heard about it, it was these past 3 days, and I'm kind of learning about domain-driven design and how a lot of the projects that I work on actually apply this feature. And essentially, domain-driven design is how we organize our code base in terms of the domain of problem that we're working on. And so what I've learned is that TypeScript is really helpful towards this method because we are very strict about what our types are and what we're working on. When I was actually building out a kind of graphic for domain-driven design for my specific project, the types that I had set kind of put out the building blocks for what domain-driven design is. I really encourage you guys to look into the approach because it's possibly something that you already do at work but don't know about it. And as you get closer to a more senior level, you start to realize this is a very good way to organize your app. And TypeScript is very beneficial in terms of that. So I do recommend it if you have time to check it out. There's so many resources online if you put domain-driven design in React. So many people have a lot of opinions, examples of how it's put together. So it works really well with React. And I believe it's becoming a little bit more popular as well. Yeah, I think that is my last slide. Yes, cool. I think we're doing questions in another room, right? Okay, cool. All right, thank you.